Welcome to Breaking News to Trading Moves. We are here to talk about the markets, the data, and the players moving the needle.
Good to be here.
Today, our focus is locked on a specific update from the pharmaceutical heavyweight Roche. They've just dropped some data regarding their experimental multiple sclerosis drug, Fenebrutinib.
That's right. We're looking at a phase 3 trial result. And what we're going to do is, look at the data itself, but then also try to identify the winners and maybe the losers that come out of this news.
We'll be going through the clinical results, the market reaction, and all the specific companies involved. Now, before we get into the details, just a quick heads up on the format. We will be mentioning stock tickers throughout this discussion.
Yep. And you might see these on social media with dollar signs attached to them. For our purposes here, just ignore the symbol. We're just going to read out the letters so you know exactly which company we're talking about.
Perfect. Okay, let's get right into the headline. The core news here is that Roche's Fenebrutinib met its main objective in a phase 3 trial.
And phase 3, that's really the final hurdle before you go to the regulators. This is the big one.
This is the big show. Now, what kind of MS were they studying here? Because that matters, right?
It matters a great deal. To be specific, this trial was focused on primary progressive multiple sclerosis, or PPMS.
PPMS.
And that's a crucial distinction. Most people, when they hear MS, they probably think of the relapsing remitting kind, where you have an attack, you have symptoms, and then you get better for a while.
Right. There are periods of calm.
Exactly. PPMS is, well, it's different. It's a steady, gradual worsening of the disease with no real remissions.
So a totally different beast to treat. And in this trial, Roche didn't just test their new drug against a sugar pill, did they?
No, and that's what makes this so compelling. They compared it against their own current standard of care treatment, Ocrevus.
That's a high bar.
A very high bar. Ocrevus is a blockbuster drug. It is the standard of care in this space. So you're not trying to beat nothing, you're trying to beat the best thing currently available.
So what did the data show? What was the outcome?
The data shows that Fenebrutinib reduced the risk of disability progression by 12% compared to Ocrevus.
12%. Okay, now I have to ask.
Yeah.
To the average person, 12% might not sound like a slam dunk.
Right.
If I got a 12% raise, I'd be happy. But if my car only ran 12% better, I might not notice. Is 12% a real win here?
It is, and you have to put it in the context of primary progressive MS. You have to understand the biology of this disease. PPMS is like a relentless, smoldering fire in the central nervous system.
It just doesn't stop.
It doesn't. So to slow that freight train down by another 12% on top of what the best current drug already does, that is a technical victory and a meaningful one for patients.
Okay, that puts it in perspective. It's 12% better than the best, not 12% better than nothing.
That's the key. And looking at the timeline of the data, they noted that the separation between the two treatments, the point where the new drug clearly started doing better than the old one, that showed up after 24 weeks.
6 months in.
6 months in. And that timing matters. It suggests the mechanism of the drug takes a little time to really change the trajectory of the disease, but once it kicks in, it holds.
So what's the plan going forward for Roche? Are they running to the FDA with this data tomorrow morning?
Not quite. They've stated they plan to pursue approval, but there's a condition attached to this.
Okay.
Roche is waiting for additional phase 3 data. They have another huge study ongoing that's looking at relapsing MS, which is that more common form of the disease we mentioned earlier.
So they want the full package before they file the paperwork. They want to go for the whole MS market, not just this one segment.
That seems to be the strategy, yes. They don't expect that second set of data until the first half of 2026.
2026.
So the timeline is set for a potential approval push only after those results are in.
Okay, so why does the market care about this specific trial right now? If the actual filing and approval is potentially years away, why is everyone looking at this today?
It all comes down to the scarcity of options for PPMS. Primary progressive multiple sclerosis has very, very limited treatment options. For a long time, it was sort of in the too hard pile for drug developers.
The Mount Everest of neuro-immunology.
It is, really. The disease is characterized by this steady worsening of function. It isn't just about inflammation coming from the outside. It's about degeneration happening on the inside of the central nervous system. Slowing that down is incredibly difficult.
So getting a positive phase 3 readout here, even if it's not a home run number, It implies something important about the drug itself.
It changes expectations across the board. It suggests the drug is actually getting into the brain, past the blood-brain barrier, and hitting the target where it matters.
Right.
When you see a success in a hard-to-treat area like PPMS, it raises the bar for everyone else.
It effectively tells the rest of the industry, this is possible.
And it also says this is the new standard you have to beat.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to the winners then. We can categorize these to make it a bit clearer. The first group we're looking at are what you might call read-through developers in BTK and neuro-immunology.
This is a classic market reaction. We call it a read-through because investors, they look at Roche's success and they apply that logic to other companies doing similar kinds of work.
It's validation by association.
Exactly. The logic is if the science works for Roche, it validates the entire approach for other companies pursuing it.
So what is the approach here, the mechanism?
The drug, Fenebrutinib, is what's called a BTK inhibitor. That stands for Bruton's tyrosine kinase.
Okay.
It's an enzyme that plays a really key role in activating certain immune cells called B cells. For years, the hypothesis has been, if we can inhibit BTK, maybe we can stop the immune system from attacking the brain and spinal cord.
But until you have positive phase 3 data, it's just a hypothesis on a whiteboard.
Right. It's a theory. A clear phase 3 signal in a tough disease like PPMS improves investor confidence in all of these related immune-modulating approaches. It really helps the sentiment for strategies focused on BTK inhibitors broadly.
So it's not just about Roche's specific molecule, it's about the target, the BTK enzyme.
Yeah.
It proves that hitting that target is a valid way to treat the disease.
Precisely. If the biology is validated in a phase 3 trial, it de-risks the science for others who are pursuing similar paths. It suggests that this way of treating the disease has merit.
And the companies that benefit are the ones with the right kind of profile.
Yes, we're talking about large pharma companies, the ones with established immunology R&D departments and, the platform know-how in this specific area.
Okay, so let's list the names. Which companies are seeing a benefit from this sentiment? First up is Bristol Myers Squibb. The ticker is BMY.
Bristol Myers Squibb, BMY, has been investing very heavily in immunology for years. They have their own assets, their own theories on how to tackle these pathways. So when Roche wins, it sort of validates BMY's strategy and makes their pipeline look a little bit smarter.
Next on the list is Pfizer, ticker PFE.
Pfizer is obviously massive, but they've faced setbacks in other areas recently. A win for the mechanism of BTK is good news for their internal programs that might be targeting similar pathways, even if they aren't for MS specifically. It lifts the whole category.
And we have AbbVie. The ticker is ABV.
AbbVie is an immunology powerhouse. They built their entire empire on Humira. They desperately need the next generation of immune drugs to come through. A win for this class of drugs helps sustain the valuation of their own pipeline.
And finally, in this group, Sanofi, ticker SNY.
Sanofi is arguably the most direct beneficiary here, aside from Roche itself.
Why is that?
They have their own BTK inhibitor, a drug called Tolebrutinib, that's also in late-stage development for MS. The fact that Roche's drug works and appears to work inside the brain is a very, very strong signal that Sanofi's drug might do the same.
Okay, so it de-risks their program in a major way.
It does. It gives investors a lot more confidence that Sanofi might have a winner on their hands, too.
All right, let's move to our second category of winners. Clinical trial and drug development services. This feels like the picks and shovels trade.
It's exactly that. It's a second-order effect. When a drug like this succeeds, it doesn't just benefit the drug maker. It stimulates the entire research ecosystem.
So success here means more work for the service providers.
Yes. Just think about the demand drivers. If Fenebrutinib is successful, Roche's competitors can't just sit back and let them take the entire market. They have to respond.
They have to launch their own trials.
That's right. It leads to more MS programs getting funded. It leads to bigger, more complex comparative trials to prove that their drugs are competitive or maybe even better.
And larger trials mean larger regulatory packages. You can't just run a trial with 50 people and go to the FDA anymore.
No, you need thousands of patients, often across dozens of countries. And that increases the demand for very specific types of work. We're talking about contract research organizations or CROs.
These are the companies that pharma companies hire to actually run the experiments.
They do everything. The data management, the patient recruitment, building out all of that infrastructure.
And that infrastructure has to be immense.
It is. Finding a patient with primary progressive MS who fits the very specific criteria for a clinical trial is not easy. You need a global network of clinics and doctors to do that effectively.
And this demand would span across both the neurology and immunology fields, I imagine.
It's a broad lift for the entire sector. When the science advances like this, the volume of testing required to support it goes up.
Let's look at the tickers for these service providers then. First is IQVIA, ticker IQV.
IQVIA is the giant in the room. They're a massive CRO. They combine deep data analytics with the boots-on-the-ground work of clinical trial execution. If you're a big pharma company running a massive global phase 3 trial, IQVIA is often the first phone call you make.
Next up is MedPace, ticker MEDP.
MedPace is an interesting one. They focus more heavily on biotech and smaller to mid-sized pharma companies, but they have very deep expertise in complex areas like metabolic and neurological diseases. So as more companies try to enter this space, MedPace is well positioned to get those contracts.
And the third one is Charles River Laboratories, ticker CRL.
Charles River is crucial, but more on the early stage side of things. Before a drug ever gets tested in a human, it has to go through extensive safety testing in animals.
The preclinical phase.
Exactly. And Charles River dominates that preclinical safety space. So if this news encourages more early stage research and investment into new BTK inhibitors, Charles River sees that volume first.
Okay, our third category of winners is in specialty drug distribution. This is getting the drug from the factory to the patient.
This is the logistics side of the equation. It's a part of the process we often forget about. These neurology therapies, especially the new advanced ones, are very high-cost specialty items.
They aren't exactly things you can just pick up at a standard pharmacy counter along with your toothpaste.
Not at all. They typically move through specialty distribution channels. These channels require specialized handling. Some of these drugs need to be kept at very specific temperatures, what's called the cold chain.
Right.
They also require a lot of patient support services to help people understand how to take them, manage side effects, and so on.
And the really complicated part, navigating reimbursement. Someone has to help the doctor and the patient get the insurance company to actually say yes and pay for the drug.
Correct. The distributors often own or partner with these service hubs that manage all that paperwork and prior authorization.
So the revenue driver here is simply volume. More expensive drugs flowing through the system.
It's a combination. A new entrant like Fenebrutinib and the expanded treatment adoption it could create that lifts volumes. I mean, if there was effectively no great treatment for PPMS before and now there is, that's all net new volume moving through the warehouse.
And that lifts services revenue over time.
That's right. The more complex the drug, the more services the distributors can provide around it, and the higher the margin they can capture on that service.
Let's get to the tickers then. Who are the main distributors benefiting here? First, Cencora, ticker COR.
Cencora, which was formerly known as AmerisourceBergen, is a massive global entity into pharmaceutical distribution. They have a very, very strong specialty division that's built for these kinds of drugs.
Next, McKesson, ticker MCK.
McKesson is another heavyweight. They really act as the central nervous system of the drug supply chain, especially in the U.S. They are deeply integrated into oncology and neurology clinics where these drugs are administered.
And finally, Cardinal Health, ticker CAH.
Cardinal Health rounds out that big three group of major distributors. They all stand to benefit from the macro trend of, well, more complex drugs equals more reliance on distribution experts.
All right, now we have to look at the other side of the coin, the losers. Where's the pressure being felt? The first group seems to be the incumbent MS therapy franchises.
This is the most direct competitive threat. These are the companies that currently own the market share that Roche is coming for. In many ways, it's a zero-sum game.
So if Fenebrutinib eventually gets approved, it's just straight-up bad news for them.
It creates a lot of pressure. If there's a new effective option on the market, especially one that has beaten the current standard head-to-head in a trial, existing franchises face much tougher competition. Doctors will want to prescribe the best option for their patients.
And where specifically do they feel that pressure? Is it just market share?
Market share is the big one, certainly, but it's also about pricing power. If Roche comes in with a great new drug, the companies with older drugs can't just keep raising their prices every year like they used to.
They might even have to offer discounts to stay on the insurance formularies.
They will. It also impacts their growth assumptions. Analysts at banks have financial models predicting how much these companies will make in 2027 or 2028. A powerful new competitor means those spreadsheets all need to be updated with lower numbers.
And the payers, the insurance companies, they play a big role here too, don't they?
A huge role. Payers might start to push for what are called step edits. They might say, okay, we'll cover the new Roche drug, but you have to try and fail on a cheaper, older drug first.
Or they use the new drug as leverage.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
can go to the makers of the old drugs and say, hey, Roche is here now. If you want to stay on our preferred list, you need to give us a bigger rebate. It gives them negotiating power.
So let's list the companies facing this pressure. The first one is Biogen, ticker BIIB.
Biogen is, or was, the legacy king of MS. They have a whole portfolio, Tecfidera, Tysabri, Vumerity. Their entire corporate identity for a long time was built on their dominance in multiple sclerosis.
So a new mechanism that works better strikes right at the core of their business.
It absolutely does. It threatens their most important franchise.
Next is Teva Pharmaceutical, ticker TEVA.
Teva has Copaxone, which has been a mainstay MS therapy for decades. It's already facing a lot of generic competition, but a new, powerful, branded oral therapy like this just pushes it further towards obsolescence.
And the last one in this group, Novartis, ticker NVS.
Novartis is another major player. They have drugs like Kesimpta. Now, Kesimpta is a B-cell therapy, which is a similar mechanism to Ocrevus, the drug Roche beat in this trial.
So the logic is if Roche's new drug is better than Ocrevus.
Then, by extension, it probably also poses a threat to Kesimpta. It raises the competitive bar for that whole class of drugs.
Okay, the second category of losers involves U.S. health insurers and pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs.
This one really just comes down to cost. New branded specialty options almost always come with a very high price tag. Innovation is expensive.
So it raises the per member per month drug cost for the insurers.
It creates those margin headwinds we talked about. If the average cost of treating an MS patient on their plan goes up by $20,000 or $30,000 a year because of a new drug, the insurer's profit margin goes down.
Unless they can immediately pass that cost on to their customers through higher premiums.
Which they can't always do right away. So in the short term, they have to try to offset it. They try to negotiate bigger rebates. They institute tighter utilization management, or they make their formulary controls stricter.
It just creates more work and more friction in the system for them.
It does. They have to hire more people, more pharmacists and doctors to review claims and make coverage decisions. It's an administrative burden.
Who are the big insurers facing these headwinds? First is United Health Group, ticker UNH.
United Health is the largest health insurer in the U.S. They also own Optum, which is one of the biggest PBMs. At the end of the day, they're the ones who have to pay the bill when a doctor prescribes Fenebrutinib.
Then the Cigna Group, ticker C-.
Cigna is in the same boat. They own Express Scripts, another huge PBM. Their entire job is to try to keep drug costs down for their clients. A new, superior, and expensive drug makes that job much, much harder.
And lastly, Humana, ticker HUM.
Humana is heavily exposed to the Medicare Advantage market. Older populations tend to have higher drug needs and more complex conditions. So for Humana, managing the specialty drug spend is a absolutely critical part of their profitability.
Okay, the final category of losers you've identified is smaller, neuro-focused biotechs. This one feels less direct.
It is. It's about investment flows. It's about sentiment. When a massive large-cap player like Roche scores a strong late-stage clinical win, it tends to redirect capital. It kind of sucks the oxygen out of the room for the smaller players.
So money moves toward the de-risked, proven leaders.
That's it. Investors look at Roche and say, okay, that mechanism works, that company can execute, that feels safe. Then they look at a small early-stage biotech with, phase I data, and they just see a lot more risk.
And it becomes harder for those smaller names to raise money.
It becomes harder for earlier-stage neuro-focused companies to raise capital, at least on attractive terms. A venture capitalist might ask them, why would I give you money to run a risky phase 2 trial when I can just go buy stock in Bristol Myers Squibb or Sanofi and ride the wave of a proven mechanism?
So the market is essentially saying that unless you have some kind of standout differentiation, you're going to struggle for attention and capital.
The bar just got higher. You can't just be as good as the incumbents anymore. You have to prove you're clearly better or different in a very meaningful way.
Who are some of the smaller biotechs that might be losing a bit of that investor attention here? First is Acadia Pharmaceuticals, ticker ACAD.
Acadia operates in the CNS, the central nervous system space. They're competing for that same pool of specialist investor capital. If the generalist investors all rotate into the big pharma names, a company like Acadia might see less trading volume and less interest.
And the other one is Sage Therapeutics, ticker SAGE.
Sage is another company that focuses on brain health. They've had their own struggles with data in the past. In a risk-off environment where investors are flocking to the perceived safety of Roche's positive data, a company like Sage might find the fundraising environment a bit tougher.
Okay, so that's a good overview of the winners and losers. Now, looking ahead, what should investors be watching for next following this news?
I think there are three main things to keep an eye on. First, and most important, we need to see the full Phase 3 details. We have the headline result, but we need the nuance.
We need more than just that 12% number.
We need to see the magnitude of the benefit across different patient subgroups. Did it work better for younger patients versus older patients? What about patients with more advanced disease?
And what about the safety profile? That's always key, isn't it?
It's the elephant in the room with this class of drugs. Historically, some BTK inhibitors have had issues with liver toxicity. Roche needs to show a very clean safety profile for Fenebrutinib.
Because if it helps the brain but hurts the liver, that's a major problem.
It's a non-starter, so safety is paramount. We also need to check the durability of the effect beyond that initial 24-week separation timeline.
Does the benefit hold up at year 2, year 3?
Exactly. MS is a lifelong disease. A 6-month benefit is nice, but what clinicians and patients really want to see is a long-term durable effect.
Okay, so that's point one.
Yeah.
Get the full data. What's the second thing to watch?
The second thing is that other data set we mentioned, the relapsing MS data.
Right. A reminder that Roche expects this in the first half of 2026.
And they have explicitly indicated they will pursue a regulatory filing only after those results are in. So that data is the next major catalyst for the drug.
And the third point,
Competitive responses. Watch what the other companies in the space do now.
how might they respond?
You might see changes to clinical trial designs from competitors. Will Sanofi change their endpoints to try and show superiority in a different way? Will Biogen or Novartis decide to start new trials combining their existing drugs with other mechanisms?
And you also have to monitor the payer and formulary posture across the whole MS category.
That's a huge one. How quickly will insurance companies and PBMs update their coverage policies? Will they put this new drug on their preferred list right away? Or will they put up barriers? That will tell us a lot about the real-world revenue potential.
Let's circle back to something you mentioned earlier because it seems central to all of this, the blood-brain barrier. We kind of glossed over it, but it seems like the key to why this drug might have worked where others have failed in PPMS.
It is. It's the central challenge of all of neurology drug development. The blood-brain barrier is essentially a defensive wall. It's a layer of tightly packed cells that line the blood vessels in your brain.
Its job is to protect the brain.
Exactly. It exists to keep toxins, bacteria, and other harmful substances that might be in your blood out of your brain tissue. But the problem is, it also keeps most drugs out.
So traditional antibody drugs, like Ocrevus, very large molecules, aren't they?
They're massive on a molecular scale. You can think of them like a tank. They are incredibly powerful and specific, but they're just too big to squeeze through the narrow gates of the blood-brain barrier effectively.
So they mostly work in the periphery, in the bloodstream.
Yes. The theory is they work by cleaning up the problematic immune cells in the blood. And the hope is that cleaning up the blood indirectly helps calm things down in the brain.
And Fenebrutinib is different.
It's what's called a small molecule. So instead of a tank, think of it like a motorcycle. It's specifically designed to be small and have the right chemical properties to slip right through that barrier.
So it's fighting the fire from inside the house, not just spraying water on the roof from the street.
That is a perfect analogy. And in PPMS, the consensus is that the real fire, that smoldering inflammation, is already inside the house. That's why getting a drug that can penetrate that barrier and work directly in the brain tissue is so exciting to the scientists in this field.
And that would explain why this is a read-through win for the chemical engineers at places like Pfizer and Bristol Myers, who specialize in designing these clever small molecules.
It really does. For a while, big antibody biologics were all the rage. This result brings small molecule chemistry right back into the spotlight for neuro-immunology. It shows what it can do.
That's a great explanation. I want to dig a bit deeper into the loser category, specifically regarding the insurers. You mentioned UnitedHealth and Cigna. Is this just a short-term hit to their quarterly earnings, or does it change their long-term model?
I think it forces an evolution of their model. You know, the era of relying on cheap generics to offset the cost of branded drugs is, well, it's fading. We are entering an era of extremely complex and expensive biologics, cell therapies, and genetic medicines.
All of which come with six-figure price tags.
or seven-figure price tags. So the insurers have to become much more sophisticated at what they call utilization management. They can't just issue a blanket no anymore. They have to use data and diagnostics to predict which specific patient will actually benefit from a $100,000 a year drug.
So they might start demanding more testing before they approve the drug, like a genetic test or a biomarker test.
Exactly. They might come back and say, we will pay for Fenebrutinib, but only if you prove the patient has this specific biomarker that shows they are likely to respond. It's a way for them to keep their costs down by narrowing the eligible patient population to only those who will get the most benefit.
So it becomes a kind of data war between the pharma company, which is trying to sell the drug to as many people as possible, and the insurer, who is trying to limit its use to as few people as possible.
And the doctor and the patient are often caught in the middle of that. But from an investment perspective, it means the administrative costs and complexity for insurers just keep going up.
Let's wrap up this deep dive with a final look at that timeline. You said 2026 for the next big data drop from Roche. In market terms, that's a lifetime away.
It is a very long time.
Does waiting that long leave a window open for a competitor to maybe catch up or even get ahead?
It absolutely does. This is a race. Roche has a clear lead with this positive PPMS data, but by choosing to wait for the relapsing MS trial to finish before filing, they are taking a calculated risk.
What's the risk and what's the reward for them?
The reward is that if both trials are positive, they can go to the FDA with a massive comprehensive data package and ask for a very broad label that covers most forms of MS. That's a huge commercial prize.
And the risk?
The risk is that a competitor, and all eyes are on Sanofi here, could get their own data sooner. If Sanofi's data looks great in, say, 2025 and they decide to file immediately, they could potentially steal the march and get to market first.
So investors really need to be watching the Sanofi news flow and clinical trial calendar just as closely as they're watching Roche's.
Correct. Fenebrutinib, that's Sanofi's drug, is the real dark horse here. If their data looks just as good, and they prove to be more aggressive on their regulatory timeline, the winner status for Roche could get a lot more complicated.
Competition is good for the patient, but certainly stressful for the shareholder.
That is almost always how it works in this industry.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today, from the microscopic level of B cells and enzymes all the way to the macroeconomic level of insurance margins and global supply chains.
It really does show how interconnected this whole ecosystem is. You pull one thread, a single trial result announced from a company in Switzerland, and you can see the fabric move in New York, in pharmacy warehouses in Ohio, and in research labs in Boston.
And of course, in the portfolios of investors who are watching these tickers every day.
Indeed.
That wraps up our discussion on Roche and Fenebrutinib. That is the end of this update on market moves.
And just a final reminder for everyone listening, this is not financial advice or buy or sell recommendations. This is purely the opinion of the author.
Thank you for joining us.